follow another Jones. Now, before I was appointed to your Lordship's House as a Green Party peer, I was born and raised on a council estate in Brighton. And I was born in the 1940s, I grew up in the 1950s and 60s, and I can't remember when I found out about the House of Lords and how it's constituted. It might have been much later, but I was really shocked that there was still a feudal element going through what I thought really was a democratic system. And so that they represented to me a reminder of how the UK is still struggling to emerge from a past where a select group of people, almost all public school educated white men, were born to rule. Getting rid of this ridiculous anomaly, as Labour has announced that it's going to do, is a long overdue reform. But in my view, this particular move is actually pandering to a sort of populist dislike of elitism and makes no real sense. One crucial example of the value of hereditary peers was over the issue of sewage, when it was the Lords that reflected the public's anger at the water companies making billions of pounds for their shareholders by dumping sewage into our rivers. I found myself getting behind a major rebellion led extremely politely by the noble Lord the Duke of Wellington, an Eton-educated hereditary peer and landowner, friend to the royal family. His key amendment led to a government shift, but more importantly, it forced sewage as an issue into every MP's inbox as the public demanded better. And even during the general election, people on the doorstep were still talking about sewage. I am not mounting a defence of privilege. That offends me deeply. I'm a firm believer in a wholly elected second chamber, which has been Green Party policy since I tabled a bill on this in 2014. And my noble friend Baroness Bennet of Manor Castle tabled the same bill on arrival. So we Greens want radical change, but sensible, logical change. And therefore I find this particular rather meagre reform from Labour slightly puzzling. Why pick on hereditary peers while leaving the corrupt system of prime ministerial patronage? One effect of that cronyism is that the House has far too many non-attenders who just take the title and run off. I find that very offensive. Meanwhile, the cash for peerages scandal, along with a long list of dubious appointments, particularly by Boris Johnson, show that our system is still open to exploitation by prime ministers by giving titles to party donors and those who have provided political favours. It's a terrible process, and that's really where Labour should have started if they were really serious about positive change here. And also, why get rid of the hereditary peers but leave the 26 bishops in place? I like the moral authority that bishops bring to debates, often raising the vital issues of poverty, discrimination and deprivation that perhaps others don't. But why should they vote on legislation? How does that still make a sense in a country where we're not even Christian anymore? And fewer than 2 out of every 100 people regularly attend Church of England services. Now, there are as many former Prime Ministers sitting in your Lordship's House who've granted peerages to the Green Party as there are Green Party peers, too. And I'm making the point that Greens and other smaller parties, even Reform, are still woefully unrepresented in the Lords. The decisions by Prime Ministers to appoint peerages are totally opaque, and there doesn't seem to be any political will to ensure that smaller parties are properly represented in the Lords. Yeah. If the government insists on retaining an elected second chamber, they should make the appointments process much more transparent, ensure smaller parties are treated fairly, and stop appointing people who've done nothing other than donating money to a political party. So getting rid of the hereditaries is a tweak. It's petty. In some ways, it's cruel. And when we have a House that is undemocratic, overcrowded, dominated by silly archaic practices and unrepresentative of the British population, then we really should be careful about which changes we make. We need a smaller House, a second chamber that's representative of the regions, elected by a form of proportional representation, and operating in a modern parliamentary building rather than a 200-year-old museum that threatens to either fall down or burn down. We should have term limits, all be elected, limited in size very carefully, and quite honestly, I'm going to vote for this rubbish bill, but it's wrong.
That's very good.